Sony just announced 2 new entries in 2 of their biggest franchises, but neither are coming to PlayStation 5. Fascinatingly, Ratchet & Clank Ranger Rumble and Horizon Steel Frontiers both have trailers, gameplay demos, even a developer commentary for the latter, but neither are coming to PlayStation 5. Why? Because they are both mobile games. Now, the thing that's fascinating with this is you'll probably remember the absolute stinky poop tire fire that was Concord last year in 2024, August 2024. A hero shooter live service experiment from Sony first party that was assumedly, trying to create some sort of endless revenue stream for them. And we're going to talk about the reasons why. But that thing was massively mishandled. Obviously, the more you look into the development around it, it was never really going to work in terms of them stepping in, acquiring a game that was already in motion, spending, in theory, another couple of $100 million on it to get it over the finish line, and then trying to, like I said, put it out and compete with the hero shooters, the first-person shooters, an extremely saturated market overall. This has led to them, that led to the game shutting down 2 weeks later, but it's led to them just dropping the Ratchet & Clank, live service game, the Horizon Steel Frontiers MMORPG, without any fanfare whatsoever. We knew there was a Horizon MMO in the works. It had leaked a couple of times across the last few years, but fascinatingly, the trailers are just out there for these things. It's very clear that they have learned their lesson from Concord, where it's like, here you go, watch the footage, see what you think. For the love of God, don't come at us, and if you like it, maybe you'll support it. I do think the whole thing is fascinating though, because neither of these games are made entirely by first-party devs. Ratchet & Clank has been made by French team OBB, and the Horizon MMO is developed by South Korean team NCSoft in collaboration with Guerrilla. So we don't know exactly how much of the original Horizon team was involved, but if you look at the footage that's out there, it looks super accomplished, it looks really cool. It's very much what you would expect from an expansion of that series. Here is an infinite version of Horizon that you can get lost in. Both of these games, I have to imagine, especially in the long term, if they find anything close to a player base, will start having various skin packs, microtransactions, things like that plugged in. Because the Ratchet & Clank game, I think, looks pretty solid. It reminds me a lot of the old school Ratchet games that steered more into the shooting overall. And it seems like, they've got a cool enough control scheme. There's wall running and backflips and athleticism in regards to the different deathmatch modes that you're doing, alongside a Rocket League style football mode in terms of the physics, which looks really cool. But ultimately, why is all of this stuff happening? Well, it is because, or at least in my opinion, it is the last remnant of the Jim Ryan live service era. Jim Ryan was the former Sony boss who stepped down at the beginning of this year. Well, towards the end of last year, but the beginning of this year. And like I said, I think that they've learned a lot from Concord. Ultimately, Sony's financials are higher than ever. They recently announced that this is the most profitable generation in PlayStation history. They've outsold all of the Xboxes, I think, combined at this point. And that's even with all the price hikes as well. They increased the price of the console, but they're still doing extremely well. And CFO Lin Tao has also said that we're about halfway through the generation overall. But Sony, their lead system architect, Mark Cerny, had just started detailing the PlayStation 6, the kind of technology they're expecting to put into that thing. So it's not like, even when the PS6 arrives, the PlayStation 5 will still continue alongside. We're still getting PlayStation 4 games made as well. Silent Hill F has recently leaked as having a PlayStation 4 version in production, alongside, I think, an Xbox One, but we're definitely getting PS4. Still, that idea of Sony riding extremely high should negate the idea for these live service games, but the AAA side of things is out of control. That's an industry-wide issue, but also Sony's first party. We've had these insane budgets reported for various games. The industry average across the medium is around $200 million for a AAA game. We found that out in 2023 during the Activision acquisition between them and Microsoft/Xbox. But when you take that number into account, Concord apparently cost something close to $400 million. That was including acquisition costs and the additional dev time that was then put into the game, as well as delaying it and trying to make sure that it would launch very well, and it didn't. So we had a couple $100 million more than the industry average. Spider-Man 2 cost over $300 million to make, something close to $315 million to put together. The Last of Us 2 cost $220 million, so that's closer to the average, but it's very clear that Sony trying to maintain this upper end of being the name in first-party story-based games with incredibly rendered graphics and incredibly punchy cinematic storytelling. That is costing a lot of money. And the Jim Ryan solution, like I said, he stepped down because none of his approach worked. However, the amount of games that he did put into production is what we're now seeing. His solution to that was, let's just have a ton of live service games. And you can argue that Sony need these. They need one of these to work, whether it's the Horizon one, the Ratchet and Clank one. We're still apparently getting a first-person shooter somewhere down the line from Jason Blundell, who I think worked on Call of Duty back in the day. They snapped him up to do something in that realm. At least it would make sense if they are. And so, like I said, they need one of these to work. It has to form the backbone for how Sony are able to keep doing this going forward. If you want future games in the style of a God of War, a Ghost of Tsushima, a Ghost of Yotei, Spider-Man, whatever, they need to be able to bring this stuff together. Or the budgetary side of things on the dev side has to figure itself out. Fascinatingly, as a comparison, and obviously the comparison is obvious if you compare the level of fidelity, graphical fidelity, and the level of depth that is in something like a Ghost of Yotei compared to Pokemon ZA, but we do know from a most recent Nintendo leak that Pokemon ZA only cost $30 million to put together. The vast majority of Pokemon games are that or less, which is literally like, as you can work out, a tenth of what was put into Spider-Man 2. Nintendo will then make an absolute killing on Pokemon ZA, and it's obviously not like every company has a Pokemon in their midst. Clearly, there is a lot of work to be done in analyzing consumer expectations, because not every single one of us cares about, the Rockstar, the Naughty Dog levels of graphical fidelity that takes so long to put together, painstakingly making sure that a character's irises change based on the lighting conditions as they walk into a room or whatever it is. I think that's a big part of how runaway a lot of this stuff has got. However, the counterpoint to that is the absolutely insane amount of hype around GTA 6 and how ridiculous that thing looks. And it's apparently going to also be the world's first billion-dollar game. When all's said and done, the amount of money that has been spent on GTA 6 across the last decade plus is apparently over $1 billion. I think that will be, one of its kind. That won't be the case again until the likes of GTA 7 comes around in another 20 years or something. But still, you have that ongoing concern, you have that ongoing conversation around what is a AAA game, what is a AAA story-focused game, what is a AAA multiplayer game, and how do all those other budgets get managed. We're also seeing Sony as another solution, because clearly the amount of live service games they had in production, initially they had 12 games in production, and all of those were canned, apart from, like I said, the Ratchet and Clank game we now have, the Horizon game, there's a first-person shooter coming, and there's apparently something that is codenamed Gummy Bears, but we don't know what that is yet. Outside of that, Sony are moving into the PC space, which is the wider conversation, coming out of the likes of the Steam machine being announced by Valve, Xbox moving into, Windows machines. The Rogue Xbox Ally has a Windows underpinning to it and then an Xbox layer on top in terms of how it works. Sony are very much steering into this. They had a cross-buy logo leak from a data miner who looked into the PlayStation Store and found assets for a cross-buy logo. Sony have done this before, but it was cross-buy between two first-party consoles. It used to be that if you bought a game on PlayStation 3, you then had the PSP/the PS Vita version then waiting for you, cross-buy. You buy one, you get both. They are, in theory, doing that again, but for PlayStation 5 and PC games. They want to encourage you to maybe head over to PC and have your console library already available for you, or at least have some sort of library already available to you. It's fascinating looking at them announcing a dedicated PC desktop monitor, something that is a very deluxe item. It's like $350. It's the same price as what is now the reduced PlayStation 5 in Japan, which is kind of crazy, but they want you to be thinking about PC setups. They want to dip their toes into that space. They have, like I said, this dedicated PC monitor alongside these wireless speakers that look very like what you would put, next to this kind of monitor and have as a PC desktop style setup. So they are trying that stuff out as well. Is that going to be another way to bring in more money? It'll obviously easily be something that they can just do in regards to, a game drops, you go, hey, here's the PC version. It's just that they haven't done very well so far. The Last of Us on PC was an absolute mess, as have been various other titles that have made the jump, but it's something that they are figuring out. They are trying to figure out, how do we fund these insane $200, $300 million games? And that's even the baseline. Sometimes they can go above that. Is that in live service? Is that in the PC space? But it's just certainly not in the console space, which is fascinating. It seems to be more in the mobile space, because the expectations are just very much different. It's what Nintendo found out when they put Animal Crossing and Mario Kart on mobile, that people will put up with a lot more crap, or whatever we want to call it, in regards to recurrent spending methods and predatory monetization on mobile than they will on console. You can directly contrast the likes of Concord to the way that the likes of the Ratchet and Clank mobile game has now been received.